Greetings to everyone joining the session. I'm now joined by Nikolaos Koutrakis, Associate Researcher at the Fraunhofer Institute for Production Systems and Design Technology, IPK. Happy to have you with us, Nico. And can you tell us a little bit more about Fraunhofer Institute and your work there?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and it's great to be here. I work as a researcher, as you mentioned, in Fraunhofer IPK, which is part of the Fraunhofer Society, or Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, as we call it in German, which is the largest organization for applied research in Europe. So our applied research has a focus on key future relevant technologies and the commercialization of findings in business and the industry. And it covers different areas. We have different institutes, around 76, across Germany, and cooperations with different countries, around 31,000 employees, I think, in total. It covers different areas, and one of them is also manufacturing and sustainability, which is how we came to be, and we discussed the contents of this session. So IPK is located in Berlin, and we focus mainly on manufacturing technologies, production systems, and optimization, particularly my department. And this ranges from using AI or leveraging AI in general to optimize manufacturing process, and this optimization can take different forms, either using data-driven approaches to make the end results better, to shorten time, to reduce costs, to make process more sustainable through specific tools, and then covering different areas such as digital production systems or multi-agent systems, and different solutions for manufacturing in general.
Thank you very much. And now let's dive into the topic we'll be discussing today: sustainability in manufacturing, technologies and solutions for new regulatory requirements for manufacturers in Europe and in Germany. And the first thing I want to ask you, Nikos, is the EU is pushing strict sustainability rules for manufacturers. How is Germany and the German industry reacted to this?
It depends on the field that they are in, but we see that they try to find solutions to adhere to the new rules and to implement new areas and new departments to comply with the new regulations. But it can be an issue. So we saw that starting with the Paris Agreement, for example, and then the SDGs in 2015 and 2016. We saw the introduction of new areas and new reportings that were necessary. Then we have the Circular Economy Action Plan on EU level, the ESPRs, which includes the Digital Product Passport, the CSRD that just now came in force, and then the future planning on EU level, which is the Digital Product Passport around 2027, I think, or 2028, and the Digital Battery Passport accordingly. So they all affect somehow the manufacturing industry and their processes.
Mm-hmm. And how has the German industry responded to the German manufacturing industry, that is?
So we divide sustainable development usually in two parts. We have the optimization, which is the possibilities for influencing sustainability indicators, and then we have the impact of the processes. So there is a two-way approach. The one is the monitoring, and the other one is the optimization of the processes themselves. And we're in discussion with a lot of them to see what kind of solutions would be appropriate for their factory or for their shop floor. Because they want to adhere to the regulations, but sometimes they are either missing the tools or they were missing the time to comply accordingly. And I think as the measures become stricter and as the net neutrality or carbon neutrality as a date comes nearer, in the future, they will be pushed to do more changes more quickly. So the time ahead is most important for preparation for them.
Mm-hmm. And staying on that, what is the toughest part for German manufacturers trying to comply with these new rules, and how can they tackle it?
I think the toughest part is the amount of different rules that exist. If you go through a document to see what the regulations are, I don't think that there is one answer that can be found for each topic individually. It's very, very complicated what each regulations have brought. So you can imagine when we're talking about these subjects, we cover not only the development or the planning, but we start from planning, we go through engineering and design, we move to production planning, supply chain, production itself, so manufacturing, logistics, use and service, and then the end of life and what happens afterwards with the products. So now imagine 20 different regulations that cover these 8 areas of interest of companies. And then imagine the thousands or millions of products that exist. So it's a very complicated equation to solve. So I think one of the most important things is to collect them all together and make a plan early on how to tackle the different approaches. Yes, it can be challenging, but I think there are solutions. So when talking about sustainability and circularity, understanding the scope would be the first thing to see how you can adjust your processes. So I think there are different ways that they affect the industry. You need to have a robust strategy and vision, of course, on how to move forward, appropriate processes for data management, appropriate roles, appropriate data sets. I think you know the subject well with the databases of one-click LCA for different products and materials, etc. The different assessment methodologies, LCA being one of them, or circularity assessments. And then the IT architecture. So when we're talking about digital integration, I think it's paramount to see how the networking of the system or the company can actually work to combine all the different flows of information to be able to complete the reporting. The tools, so some sort of PLM integration or other integrations that would be useful. And yeah, I think covering those different areas is a good first step. That would make it less difficult than it is.
And I see here a theme, a trend for harmonization and a lack of that, actually. And I agree 100%. And you mentioned the shortage of staff. So do you also see the shortage of qualified trained professionals for sustainability roles to perform LCA, for instance, as a big challenge for manufacturers in Germany specifically?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge in general. So we see a shortage of skilled workers across different industries. So it's not only manufacturing, but particularly manufacturing. The different roles that need to be covered are a lot. So having and introducing systems that can assist with that, and they can make, for example, onboarding easier, or make new processes easier. And so sustainability reporting is one of them. I think it's paramount. For example, when we're talking about the introduction of a new process or a new product, and we can take the example of the automotive industry because I think it's easier for everyone to understand. Imagine you have a manufacturing line or a production plant that focuses on internal combustion engines. And then with the introduction of net neutrality or carbon neutrality in the future, we see that after 2035, let's say, the internal combustion engine will not be used anymore or won't be available in new products coming into the market. So the companies will build and will be building different products, let's say electric drive units for their cars. Now imagine hundreds of factories that will need to be adapted to build the new manufacturing lines and to build the new products. Of course, over the last 20 or so years, they have a workforce that was trained specifically on the product of the past, internal combustion engine. So how can they retrain all those people and teach them the new processes as fast as possible? And I imagine that on top of that, the new products and the new processes, you need to also include the reporting and the adherence to regulations on an EU level. So I think the solution are actually production assistance systems that can make this a bit easier. So The goal is to decrease the process complexity, to counteract the shortage of workers or skilled workers, which in general leads to less errors and less time for reworking of processes. This means less scrap. And when we're talking about sustainability, less scrap is part of zero defect manufacturing, which means less energy, less materials, and it's certainly better for the manufacturer and also the goals. Then training becomes less expensive and time consuming, and I think also documentation is easier. So solutions like that and tools like that certainly help. Then there is the automated reporting that can happen. So we developed a solution for energy monitoring on machine tools. We saw that particularly older machine tools didn't have sensors or systems that were able to give information regarding the energy usage for specific processes. And through a publicly funded project, we developed a solution that can do exactly that. So a retrofitting box that can see what kind of energy uses a specific machine tool has. And then we combine different machine tools for different processes. We're looking at the entire life cycle of the product development and product manufacturing to give an answer on what kind of energy was used to manufacture it, and then to see how can we adapt those processes in the future based on the uses that we had until now for this process. So adding new sensors, adding new tools, adding new software can make this process significantly easier for the manufacturers. Nowadays, most machine tool companies or machine tool manufacturers have solutions like that, maybe not at the level of detail that we are supplying or that we are developing, but at least it's a step in the right direction to see how much you are using or how much electricity or energy you are using when developing and manufacturing a product.
Well, I think you sort of answered this question, or part of it. What kind of new technologies or solutions that are you seeing that can help with also meeting these stricter sustainability goals and requirements that are coming in relation to what you just mentioned?
What I mentioned covers the manufacturing part partly. So we see that we can use less energy. We see that we can track processes. But in order to combine them all, of course, you would need some sort of idea of having the digital representation of the product available for you. So what we call digital twins in manufacturing, which is a basic definition of having a one-to-one representation of a physical product system or a process. And then you track the changes onto that and you save the information onto that, which is sort of the intelligent linking between the different levels. And then you need to implement some sort of architecture that allows data to flow from level to level. So even if we introduce a system like the energy monitoring that I mentioned about, where does this data land and how can the stakeholders use them to report what needs to be reported or to adjust their processes based on what is needed. We saw, for example, initiatives like Gaia X and Catena X on German and European level that have standard frameworks or architectures that make it easy for heterogeneous systems to communicate with each other if they adhere to the same protocols, adhere to the same principles. And I think this is a step in the right direction. But I think in general towards sustainability, a revamping of different processes is needed at a deeper level. And what we saw based on our research and based on our experience is that there are so many ways that you can affect the energy output or the sustainability of a product or a process that until now wasn't really considered. So optimizing a process with AI, for example, which is now significantly easier, faster, and with better results, already is a step in the right direction for the reason that I mentioned before. So less scrap, better products, less reworking. But even going a step before that on how the product will be designed, what we saw is that sustainable product design and designing products with second life in mind as well plays a big part in achieving the goals that you might set on EU level, on national level, and company level. Because if the product cannot be reused, remanufactured, graded, or whatever circularity strategy you choose, then you cannot do anything. And we saw that with a lot of products in the past, and even now, some of them, that the sustainable product design was never the first choice or the first priority, let's say, for a lot of manufacturers. So I think when you look at the processes from beginning to end, you can find solutions for each of them that will make it easier. So I come from the manufacturing technology side and the production systems and the connection with IT and digital integration. Colleagues at the Institute, for example, cover all the areas besides that. And I think sort of combining all together is the way to cover the regulations.
And in this context, we talked about data and data sets before. Do you see a data-first approach as a way forward for manufacturers? What's the role of data and the importance in this effort?
I think it's huge. I think we have seen a big shift. So manufacturing industry is not the most groundbreaking when it comes to adoption of new technologies. It has always been a tad conservative, let's say, for good reason, I might add. But access to data and data sets and being able to utilize and leverage data and algorithms has started to develop over the last 5 years, maybe a bit more. It started 10 years ago, but the adoption was lower. I think recent changes also in infrastructure have made it easier for companies to have data first approaches. And certainly the latest advancements in AI technology and the ease of use and the ease of implementation of those solutions have made it easier for companies to adopt such solutions, because particularly when we're talking about pattern recognition or prediction of outcomes or monitoring, an AI system or an algorithm can certainly give us maybe better answers than what we could get until now. Of course, it needs to be tailored to each specific use, in each specific company, each specific product, each specific process. But if the company has the data, then they can deploy it much more easily than before. Now, in terms of data gathering, which would be the first step, I think they have made huge leaps in the last years. Not every company, but at least a couple of them. We have an example of a German manufacturer that is located in Berlin that just decided to go with the approach of collecting all the data that will be useful to them and then looking later for specific use cases and how they can leverage them. But the first step was to say that they just need to collect the data because they will be able to find a use case for them later, which is very rare because almost no one does that without a specific use case in mind. But they set them up for the next 15 to 20 years and then made their job easier. And I think if other manufacturers follow the same principle and approach to say that, okay, let us collect all the data and see what happens next, they will certainly see a benefit in the next years. So particularly to bring it back to our subject, when we are talking about regulations and we're talking about new reporting that needs to be done from companies on a national and European level, I kid you not, a lot of companies were doing all the reporting with printed paper until very recently on the shop floor and from different departments. A company was telling us or was presenting that very recently, and we could not believe it. They were actually like coming with a pack of or a stack of papers, and they were building reports out of that. So you can imagine what kind of not only energy they were using in paper to do that, but what kind of time they were wasting. And I think it's slowly becoming better, but I think the way is to build systems that rely on data and sort of combine them together to reach the end target. Yeah, I hope I answered your question with that.
Oh, yes. More than that, that was a really interesting example. I cannot believe that in 2024 we have to talk about digitalization first. But it is not the case for many, many big and older companies. So automated solutions for data gathering, like through APIs, automation is I think the way forward and the main theme here. And
I think they have made huge leaps, and so projects in that field certainly gave open source solutions as well that make such approaches easier. Research projects that were funded from different areas of the German government also made it easier for SMEs because, and I think this is one of the important points to mention, that big companies usually might have the manpower or the workforce and the budget to develop such solutions and implement those solutions, but a startup or an SME might not. So if an SME that mostly relied on manual A labor, on B manual processes, might find it more difficult to make time on or find the budget to A, digitalize, or B, adhere to such regulations like the one that we talked about before. So yeah, I think this is also something important to mention on how will companies that are a bit smaller be able to cover this ground as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much. And if we could have one top takeaway for the audience today, I see many different trends that kept coming up during our discussion, but what would it be, according to your opinion?
Good question. I think it would be to look at the processes that they have holistically. So what sometimes happens in companies is that they look at island solutions for specific problems that they have, but that the different solutions might not necessarily communicate with each other, or systems might not communicate with each other, or that they solve one very specific problem, but they don't cover bigger areas or don't make sure that the system will be able to give a solution 5 years from now. And I think this is the takeaway, to look at the process holistically and make sure that the solutions that will be implemented start from the planning and end at the second life or end of life of the product, so that the design team and the manufacturing team and the engineering team all have the data available, A, to do the reporting, B, to adhere to the rules, and C, to make products that are more sustainable and that are easier to reuse or remanufacture after the end of life.
Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. And thank you for joining us today, Nikos, to discuss more about how manufacturers in Germany and in Europe can comply with upcoming regulatory requirements. And thank you for joining us. And I wish you all have a really good day. And thank you all for joining us today for this session.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.